A little girl ran into the road. The man who saved her was her mother's first love. The rain had started as a whisper, a few drops against the window of a worn-out apartment on the outskirts of the city. By nightfall, it had become a storm. Inside the dimly lit kitchen, Emily Ward, a 28-year-old single mother, tried to calm her restless daughter. "Lila, sweetheart, please sit down," she murmured as she poured soup into 2 chipped bowls. The little girl's curls bounced as she spun around, clutching her tiny stuffed rabbit. "Mommy, you promised we could watch the stars tonight." Emily smiled softly, though her heart ached. "There are no stars tonight, baby. Just rain." Outside, the wind howled like an old ghost. The small apartment flickered with the light of a single lamp, the only warm glow in a long, hard day. Emily worked double shifts at a diner, barely making enough to cover rent. But she hid it well. For Lila, she always found a reason to smile. That night, as the clock struck 10, Emily tucked her daughter into bed and glanced at the stack of bills on the counter. Her hands trembled as she sighed, whispering to herself, "You'll be okay, Em. You always are." But fate, cruel and kind in equal measure, had other plans. The next morning was gray, the kind of dawn that felt heavy. Emily woke to the sound of rain still tapping against the window. She needed to take Lila to school early before heading to her shift. They hurried down the street, umbrellas forgotten in the rush. Lila's little boots splashed in puddles, her laughter bright against the dull sky. "Stay close, honey," Emily warned, trying to juggle her bag and coffee. But in the next instant, it happened. A car horn blared. Tires screeched. Lila darted into the road to chase her fallen rabbit, and Emily's scream tore through the morning. "Lila!" Time froze, a blur of motion. A man, tall, fast, dressed in black, sprinted into the street. He scooped Lila into his arms just as a delivery van skidded past, missing them by inches. For a moment, all Emily could hear was the pounding of her heart and the rain against the pavement. The man slowly turned, his arms still around the trembling child, and when Emily looked up, her breath caught, because the man holding her daughter, the man who'd just saved her life, was Daniel Hayes, her first love, her heartbreak, the boy who'd once promised her forever, then vanished into the noise of the world. Emily's voice faltered. Daniel?" He blinked, equally stunned, the rain tracing down his sharp jawline. "Emily?" His tone was low, almost unbelieving. For a few seconds, they just stared, both drenched, both silent, bound by a memory neither of them had expected to relive. Then Lila sniffled, breaking the spell. "My bunny." Daniel crouched down, retrieving the little rabbit from the wet asphalt. He brushed it off, handing it back gently. "There you go, kiddo, safe and sound." Emily knelt beside her daughter, pulling her close. "I told you not to run." "Sweetheart." Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry, Mommy," Lila whispered. When Emily looked up again, Daniel was still there, soaked, but smiling faintly. He looked older now, sharper, dressed in the sleek black coat of someone who'd made it far from this small town. But his eyes, they hadn't changed. They were still the same deep brown she'd fallen for when they were 17. "Thank you," Emily finally said, her voice soft, trembling. "You saved her life." Daniel hesitated, studying her face as if trying to believe she was real. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again," he said quietly. And, like this, Emily forced a small shaky smile. "Neither did I." For a moment, the world stood still, rain, memories, and unspoken words hanging between them. Then Lila tugged Daniel's sleeve. "Are you a superhero?" she asked, eyes wide. Daniel laughed. The sound carried warmth that cut through the storm. "Not even close," he said. "Just someone passing by." But Emily noticed the logo on his car parked nearby, Hayes Motors, printed in silver across the hood. He wasn't just passing by. He was the CEO of one of the biggest automotive firms in the city. Her heart twisted. Daniel Hayes had become everything she once dreamed of, and everything she could never reach now. As he helped her to the sidewalk, his hand brushed hers for a fleeting second. Familiar, warm, electric. "Let me give you a ride," he offered gently. Emily shook her head quickly. "No, really, you've done enough." "Emily." His tone was firm but soft. "It's raining. Please." Something in the way he said her name, the same way he used to when they were kids, made her heart skip. And so, for the first time in 8 years, Emily found herself sitting beside Daniel Hayes again, in silence, with her daughter asleep in the back seat, the rain whispering stories against the windows. Little did she know, this wasn't the last time fate would bring him to her. It was only the beginning. The drive to Lila's school was quiet, the kind of silence that felt alive, filled with everything neither of them dared to say. The windshield wipers moved rhythmically, slicing through sheets of rain as city lights shimmered in the distance. Emily sat stiffly, clutching her bag in her lap, while Daniel's hands rested on the wheel with the same steadiness she remembered. Calm, precise, confident, she stole a glance at him. His profile was sharper now, more defined, but his eyes still carried that same quiet depth. Time had sculpted him into something different, colder, maybe, but still achingly familiar. "Your daughter," he said finally, breaking the silence. "She's got your eyes." Emily smiled faintly. "Everyone says that. She's brave too." Emily turned toward him. "You mean reckless?" Daniel chuckled softly. "Brave," he repeated, his voice deep, fond, like her mom. The compliment lingered in the air between them. For a second, the years seemed to vanish. The college dreams, the letters never sent, the promises broken by ambition. When they reached the school, Lila was asleep. Daniel parked the car and turned to Emily. "I can wait," he offered. "Make sure you both get inside safe." Emily hesitated. "Daniel, you really don't have to." He smiled, the same crooked smile that used to make her heart flutter. "I want to," he said simply. Something in his tone softened her guard. She nodded, quietly waking Lila and leading her into the school building. When Emily came back out, Daniel was still there, leaning against his car, the rain now just a drizzle. "Coffee?" he asked. It wasn't really a question. They ended up at a small cafe down the street, the same one they used to visit years ago. It had changed. New paint, new faces, but the smell of roasted beans and rain-damp air was the same. Emily wrapped her hands around a mug, avoiding his gaze. "So, Hayes Motors," she said, half smiling. "You really made it, didn't you?" Daniel leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Yeah," he said quietly. "At least on paper," Emily frowned. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then looked out the window. "Success doesn't feel like much when you can't share it with the person you built it for." Her heart clenched. She didn't respond, but he could see the question in her eyes. "Why did you leave, then?" Daniel set his cup down. His voice was low when he spoke again. "Do you remember that summer after graduation? When I said I got the offer in New York?" Emily nodded slowly. "I remember you promised to come back." He sighed. "I meant to. I thought I'd only be gone a few months. But then, investors, deadlines, opportunities. I blinked, and years passed. I didn't even realize how much I'd lost until it was gone." Emily's throat tightened. "You didn't write." "Not once." "I did," he said quietly. 100 times. I just never sent them." The cafe was quiet except for the sound of rain against glass. "I thought you moved on," Daniel said softly. "I tried," she whispered, "but life doesn't pause just because your heart breaks." For a long moment, they just sat there, two souls who'd once been everything to each other, now strangers bound by a shared ache that time hadn't erased. When they finally stepped back into the drizzle, Daniel reached into his pocket and handed her a small silver keychain, a car-shaped charm. "I designed this model after my first project," he said. "You used to say you wanted to drive something I built." Emily blinked, remembering a night years ago, sitting on his rooftop with cheap coffee and impossible dreams. "You remember that?" She murmured. "Every word," he said. Their eyes met, and for the first time Emily saw the regret he carried. Not the arrogance of a CEO, but the pain of a man who had everything except what truly mattered. Over the next few days, Daniel began to reappear in their lives, at the school gate, offering rides when the weather turned bad, or dropping off a box of car-shaped cookies for Lila. At first, Emily resisted, but Lila adored him. "Mommy, Mr. Daniel's funny," she'd say. "He said my toy car needs a tune-up." Emily couldn't help but smile, though each interaction made it harder to ignore the warmth creeping back into her chest. One evening, when she found Daniel sitting on a bench outside the diner where she worked, she finally asked, "Why are you really here, Daniel?" He looked up, his hair damp from the drizzle, his expression raw. "Because I never stopped caring," he said simply, "and because when I saw you again, I realized I'd been running from the only thing that ever felt real." Her breath caught. "Daniel, you can't just walk back into my life like no time has passed." He nodded. "I know, but maybe I can earn my way back in." There was sincerity in his voice, not the practiced confidence of a millionaire, but the humility of a man who finally understood what he'd lost. Later that night, Emily watched from her window as Daniel's car pulled away. Leela was asleep, clutching her stuffed rabbit, safe and warm. Emily whispered to herself, "Don't do this. Don't fall again." But when she closed her eyes, all she could see was the way Daniel had looked at Lila, not as a stranger's child, but as something precious. Maybe, she thought, people could change. Or maybe some love stories weren't meant to end, only to pause until the world was ready. The next few weeks unfolded like a second chance, Emily never asked for, and yet couldn't turn away from. Daniel became a quiet presence in her and Lila's world, never pushing, never demanding, just being there. He fixed the broken light outside their porch, left umbrellas by the door on rainy days, even dropped off car manuals for Lila's school projects. "Mom," Lila said one night, drawing at the kitchen table, "why does Mr. Daniel always smile like he's sad?" Emily paused mid-stir of her coffee. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "He smiles with his mouth," Lila said, tapping her crayon, "but not with his eyes." Emily didn't answer, because she'd noticed it too. Every time Daniel looked at Lila, there was something in his gaze she couldn't quite name. Something deeper. One evening, as twilight draped over the city, Emily stopped by Daniel's workshop. He was there, sleeves rolled up, oil stains on his hands, the image so familiar it made her chest ache. "You never really changed," she said softly. He looked up, startled, then smiled faintly. "Still breaking engines and trying to fix hearts, I guess." She stepped closer, her voice quiet. "You're good with her, with Lila." Daniel hesitated, his jaw tightening. "She's an incredible kid." Emily studied him carefully. "You look at her like she's yours." The words hung in the air. Daniel froze. And then, in that fragile silence, the truth began to unravel. "Emily," he began, voice trembling, "I wanted to tell you." Her heart raced. "Tell me what?" He took a deep breath. "That summer I left, I didn't know you were pregnant." Her eyes widened. The world seemed to tilt. "What did you just say?" "I didn't know," he whispered. "I never got your letter. I found out years later, from one of your old friends who mentioned you'd had a daughter. I thought maybe she wasn't mine. But when I saw her that day in the road—" He stopped, his voice breaking. "I knew." Emily's hands shook. "Daniel, why didn't you say something sooner?" "Because I didn't want to make things harder for you," he said. "You'd built a life. You didn't need me ruining it again." Tears stung her eyes. "You think keeping that from me made it better?" He stepped closer, desperate. I wanted to earn your trust before I told you. I didn't want to show up as a stranger claiming something sacred." She turned away, voice cracking. "You were never a stranger, Daniel. You just left before she could know you." The rain started again outside, gentle at first, then harder, a storm mirroring the one inside her chest. Daniel stood there, helpless as Emily's tears fell quietly. Finally, she whispered, "She's yours, Daniel. Lila is your daughter." He closed his eyes, a single tear cutting down his cheek. For years he'd built empires, chased dreams, drowned guilt in work. But nothing prepared him for the weight of those words. When he opened his eyes again, there was no CEO standing there, just a father. The next morning, he came to the diner early. Lila was there, coloring at the counter while Emily worked. Daniel crouched beside her. "Hey, champ," he said softly. "Can I see what you're drawing?" She grinned and held it up. "It's a car, like the one you drive." He smiled. "You're really good. Maybe you'll be an engineer someday." "Mom says I can be anything," she said proudly. Daniel nodded. "She's right." Then, after a pause, he asked gently, "Would it be okay if I came to see you more often? Maybe help you with your school project?" Lila's eyes lit up. "You mean like, you'd come back?" Daniel swallowed hard, fighting the lump in his throat. "If that's okay with your mom, I'd like to." Lila nodded enthusiastically. "I think Mom would like that too." Across the counter, Emily turned away, pretending to clean a cup, but her trembling hands gave her away. That night, Emily sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the silver keychain Daniel had once given her, the same one she'd almost thrown away 100 times. She whispered to herself, "Maybe it's not too late. Maybe love just, I took a longer road back." Outside, headlights pulled up. Daniel stood in the rain again, soaked, breathless, holding something in his hand. When she opened the door, he spoke before she could. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness," he said quietly. "I'm here to promise something." He stepped closer, pressing a small velvet box into her palm. Inside wasn't a ring, but a tiny silver car, identical to Lila's drawing. "I don't want to fix what's broken," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I want to build something new, with you both." Emily looked at him, at the man she'd loved, lost, and somehow found again. And for the first time in years, she let the tears fall freely, not from pain, but from release. She reached out, resting her hand on his cheek. "You always did build things that lasted," she whispered. He smiled, eyes glistening. "Then let's start again." The next morning, sunlight poured into the little apartment. Lila laughed as Daniel tried, and failed, to braid her hair before school. Emily watched from the doorway, her heart full. For the first time in forever, the house didn't feel heavy. It felt like home. As Daniel looked up, he met Emily's eyes across the room, and in that silent exchange, they both knew. The past was forgiven. The future was finally theirs. Sometimes, life brings people back when the timing is right, not when we expect it. And sometimes, the love that once slipped through your fingers returns, not to remind you of what you lost, but to show you what was never really gone. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and visit Kin Hidden, where every story reminds you that love always finds its way home.